So exercise 13, all about materials. Part of your exercise will be to apply materials to your tiny house that we've created. I know that some of you have already been playing around with some materials, and that's awesome. So we're just going to take a little bit of a deeper dive here today. And if you haven't messed with materials at all, then hopefully this will be a great exercise for you to learn all about materials. So materials in SketchUp, you have, you can just apply basic colors, or you can apply actual textures. And so we'll look at how both of those work. Very simply, just to get to materials. So we talk about having the default tray pulled up quite a bit. And in this default tray, you have materials here. There should be a panel for your materials. To actually activate the tool to be able to paint materials, it's this paint bucket tool over here. And the hotkey for that is just clicking B, and that'll pull up your paint bucket. So you can either click the tool or hit B, and then your mouse becomes this little paint bucket guy. And so with this paint bucket tool, we can start to apply different materials. And if you didn't have this default tray pulled up over here, I believe whenever you hit paint bucket, it'll come up for you. So if you don't have it pulled up already, just hit your paint bucket and the materials panel will show up for you. If you go to our assignment today, I've got just a quick little snapshot of the materials panel and all the different functions that it has. So this screenshot here, I'm taking it directly from your materials panel over here in SketchUp. We'll just look at some of the things that we have here. The material that you show kind of in this main window here is going to be the active material. So anything that I were to click on with this active material, that's what's going to apply. It also tells you the name of that material. There is an option to bring up a secondary materials panel. I haven't found myself using that a whole lot. So this button here, display the secondary selection panel, it'll just bring up pretty much a duplicate of what you've already got here, and you can just browse different materials at the same time. I don't always find it super helpful, but it's there just in case you want it. And then if you don't want it anymore, just click on that same button and it'll disappear. This button here that you'll see, it kind of looks like a box with a plus sign. That's how we'll create a new material, which we'll get to later. This button here is just your default material. All of these we'll kind of play with as we move forward, but right now just kind of showing you the different buttons. There's one for default material, sample material, which just is like an eyedropper tool. If you use Photoshop or any Adobe product, you can basically just pick another material and that will become the active material. This button here will give you just a details menu to give you some further options. You have a navigation button to go forward and backward. You can always hit your home button to come to this screen that we see here, which gives you all of your different categories or collections. And then, again, here I'm just pointing out that these are your different collections that you have in your model. These are all the ones that come default in SketchUp, so each time you open up SketchUp, these are the ones that are going to be there. You have a lot of different categories for different types of asphalts, cladding, fencing. So if I come over here and look at all of that here in SketchUp, go back to, so this is the page that we were seeing here before. This is just materials. And so you'll see that all of these different folders here, I can either click into them to find these, or if I just use this little drop-down menu here, I can find those here as well. So if I'm looking for a specific type of material, like maybe I'm looking for a brick, I can click on brick here, and it'll give me all of the options that SketchUp has default for brick. Oops. So with the paint bucket tool, all you have to do is just click a surface to apply the material. Goodness gracious. Okay, so if I have my paint bucket activated, I'm just going to choose a random brick for us for just a second here. All I have to do is click once to apply the material to a surface. And you'll notice that only the side of the surface that you have clicked on paints the texture. So if I go look at the underside, there's no texture applied to this underside. So every face in SketchUp has a front face and a back face. And if I select this surface up here in my entity info, it shows me the two faces and what materials they have applied to those different faces. So if I were to come to the back side now and maybe put this different material on it, now it shows me that I have brick on the top face and this stone on the bottom face. So even though this is a singular plane in SketchUp, you can have a separate material applied to the front and the back. You can also select multiple surfaces at one time to paint them. So let's say I had a couple different surfaces here that I all wanted to give the same color. I can just keep clicking on all of them, and I'm holding Control to keep on clicking all of those surfaces. So now that I have all of those selected, come back to my paint tool, click on one of them, and it'll paint all of them together, which can be a time saver. You can also, groups work a little bit funny. So this one here, you can see in my entity info, I've got this group here. So if you are just selected on the group and activate the paint bucket tool, I'm not double clicking into edit mode, I'm simply just clicking on it once. If I just paint that, it'll paint the entire group. I don't have to actually go in there, select each of the different surfaces, and paint. I can just select the one group and then paint it all together. On the flip side, so let me undo that, Control Z, I can double click into my group, and now I can paint separate surfaces of the group. And now, if I click out of the group to go back into our main model space, if I were then to select my different material and try to paint the group, it'll only paint the surfaces that I did not paint inside the actual group. Hopefully that makes sense. So it's only going to paint the surfaces that did not have a material already applied to them. Let's say that I didn't really want that. I do want my group to all be the same color. Or maybe you've just accidentally painted a surface. You can always bring it back to kind of your default material. And here's where we're going to find that default button in our materials panel. If I click on that, it'll just bring me back to the default material. And now you'll see if I click on those surfaces, the default material for the group is the brick. Does that make sense? Okay. I feel like that might get a little bit confusing if you're like, why is it not painting the color that I asked it to paint? Ask yourself, is it in a group? Same thing with components. This one's a component here. Look at the entity info, I've got a component. Same thing. I can paint. Why is this not letting me paint? Oh, because I'm on the default material. Funny. Okay. I can paint the entire component just by clicking on the component, or I can double click into it, paint separate surfaces, and then same thing. If I have painted it while it's in edit mode, it will not overwrite those materials. So groups and components act the same way when it comes to materials. So SketchUp can categorize, we saw how it categorizes brick together, just solid colors will be categorized together, metals. Let's say you're looking for a specific material that you know you already have in your model. You can do the same thing, just click on this drop down and scroll all the way up to the top, and there's one that's called In Model. And if you select that one, it's going to tell you all the materials that are already in your model. So you can see that I have some of the random textures that I had just clicked on for our demonstration, but then there are also these random solid colors, lily blonde, lily dark. Lily is that human scale figure that comes in with every SketchUp. Whenever you open up SketchUp and there's that random scale figure, that's Lily. And you now have all of her materials in your model. Took me a while to figure that one out. So I think in one of the older versions of SketchUp, the scale model had a really weird name. And so I was like, what in the world is this material? So maybe in 2024, it's not going to be Lily anymore. It might be Brenda. So you might have Brenda Blonde. Okay, and then kind of going back to last week, if you're looking through all of these materials and you're like, man, these are just not what I'm looking for. I really have like a specific material type in mind, and SketchUp just isn't having those defaults for me. The 3D Warehouse has materials with it as well. So last week we used it for components. This week we can look at it for materials. So now I have my hotkey. I can just hit W, or if you don't have your hotkey, Window, 3D Warehouse. Let's say I am looking for a specific countertop material. Maybe I'm looking for solid surface. So I'll type in solid surface, hit enter. And then as we saw last week, we have all of these kind of categories across the top. You can go straight to materials, and it'll give you a list of different materials that people have created and uploaded. So maybe you find one here that you like. There are a lot of different textures here that SketchUp default does not have. And if you find one that you like, just hit the download button. And now it is placed in your model. So now I have my solid surface here, and I can start using it. Alternatively, if I go back, if you found a product that had solid surface in it, and you liked the material in it. So let's say this very first one, solid surface. If I click on this and scroll down just a bit, you'll see this here called material count. It's telling me that there are 3 in this particular product. But if I click on material count, it brings up the materials that are in this model, and from here I can go ahead and download them. Same thing. So you can get materials just by themselves, or you can find materials from specific products. With me so far? Okay. So let's look at editing a specific material. So we can use, let's use this brick that I have here. Let me get rid of everything else, just because it drives me nuts. Okay, so I'm going to look at my brick here. Let's see how the eyedropper tool works, or the sampler that we talked about earlier. So if I click on this little eyedropper guy, and I click on the surface here that has the brick on it, then the brick turns into my active material. So that can be easy sometimes if you're like, don't want to go back and can't remember where you found your brick. Just use your eyedropper tool and grab it from there. So we have been on, within our materials panel, we've been on the select option. If you can see my cursor here, we're on the select tab. There's another tab that says edit. So if I go over there, then I now have options for different colors. I have image files that I can bring in, opacity, all that kind of stuff. So if I go back to our Canvas module, I've got another screenshot here for you. So we're in the Edit tab, or the Edit pane here. So in this panel, you're going to see the color picker, and they'll give you options for a color wheel, or if you're looking for specific RGB numbers, you can use any of those options there. You can undo your color changes. You can match colors of objects that are in your model, match colors that are on your screen, and then here are the values for the color picker. So let's just look at that for a second before we go too much further. So go back to SketchUp, and I'm actually going to bring another object here really quickly, and I'm going to paint it a different color. So if I'm back in my brick, back to my edit mode, and let's say I want to edit the color of my brick. I don't quite like the grayish reddish tones that it's giving me. I can choose on this picker here, if I drop down, there's color wheel, HLS, HSB, and RGB. Let's say I choose the color wheel, you see that it gives me just this wheel, and if I click on RGB, then it gives me the different RGB values. If there is a color in my model that I know that I want to match, let's say I want to match this brownish tan color that I have here, I can click on the button next to the color picker that says Match Color of Object in Model, and this will kind of give you like the eyedropper tool. If I click on this tannish color, then it kind of changed, my RGB values changed, and now my brick is more of that tan color. And then if I didn't like that, you can hit Undo Color Changes, and it brings it back to the original color. The next button next to Match Color of Object in Model is Match Color on Screen. So with this one, I can choose a color that is anywhere on my screen. It doesn't have to be a particular object that's in my model. So let's say that I really like the red color of my Move tool. I can click on that, and it'll match to that red color. So the difference here is if I do the Match Color of Object in the model, it's not going to let me choose any colors that are up here on my ribbon or a different part of my screen. But if I do the screen one, then it'll let me pick literally any color that's on your screen. And then, obviously, I'm not going to keep that, so I'm go back to Undo Color Changes. Actually, so if you saw there, oops, I went back too far. If you saw there how whenever I clicked that red, it's giving me a lot of this weird color, and that's probably not what I was going for. If I hit this Colorize button down here, so if I check Colorize, that's going to make every hue in this texture act the same way whenever I try and change the color. So let's see. Go back to pick color on the screen. I'll go back to this red. And now all the hues kind of acted in the same way. They're all turning more of that red color as opposed to if I didn't colorize, it was turning some of them red, some of them were blue. So if you're having problems with it coming out with that real colorful rainbowy pattern, click your colorize button and that'll probably help you get more of what you were looking for. Okay, let's see. Let's go back to Canvas here. So that is kind of your color options on this top portion. This lower portion is if you were to use a texture image. So here you have the Use Texture Image checkbox, an image file name, browsing for an image path, if you wanted to open your image in an external editor. So let's go look at those for just a second here. So this one, the brick pattern, it has a texture already assigned to it. If I unclick that Use Texture Image, the brick map suddenly disappears and I'm only left with the red color. So if you do want to use an image as part of your texture, you'll need to check Use Texture Image. And we'll look a little bit more at these other buttons when we start to kind of create our own materials here later on. In this texture editor, you can also change the width and height of the image. So let's say this brick is just way too small. You need it bigger. So right now it says 3 foot wide by 1 foot 6 high. So if I change this to 6 foot, everything got a little bit bigger, and you see that my height also changed. It was at 1 foot 6 and now it's at 3 foot. That's because this little guy right here that looks like a chain, you can choose to either lock or unlock the ratio. And that's going to help you not distort your images. So it's locked together, so it's trying to keep the same proportions of the image. Let's say if I undo and I click that little chain button, and now the chain looks like it's broken, and now I try and change that width to the 6 foot, it didn't change the height with it. The height is still at 1 foot 6, and now my brick looks a little bit distorted. So if you have an image that has specific proportions, probably a good idea to keep that lock-unlock button locked. And then the last thing that you'll see here is an opacity slider. So if you wanted it to be a little bit more transparent, you could bring the opacity down on your texture. Questions so far? Great. So changing the width and the height of our texture is maybe not always going to give us the exact result that we're looking for. Let's look at a different material. I'm going to go back to the Select tab so that I can get back to all the different materials. And I'm going to go find a tile. So if I scroll down, there is one for tile. So I'll click on the tile category, and I've got all these options here. Let's go for just this one here. Click to paint. And you can see this is probably not how I want my floor to be. I want a tile to start in one corner, and I probably don't want to be cutting my tile in the middle of the tile. So we can try and come in here and change the height and width, but honestly you're going to have a lot of trouble trying to get it exactly right. So we have some more options to edit the position of the texture. So just go back to your Select key. I hit spacebar, that's the hotkey, or just come up here to your mouse. And then if you select just click once on the surface, and then right click, come down to texture, hover over, and hit position. So SketchUp has now tried to find the extents of kind of like that single image. So it's given us the extents of one tile. It's pretty smart in that way. It can usually figure out the proportion that you're looking for. So you'll notice that we have 4 pins here. The red pin allows you to move the image to a different spot on the surface. So if you click and drag, I can start to move the image around. So maybe I want it to start down here on the corner. The blue point up here kind of starts to shear the image. So again, I'm clicking and dragging. And it's kind of starting to shear along the surface. The green point down here allows you to rotate and scale the image. So if I click and drag that one, I can either start to rotate it or I can start to scale it up and down. And then lastly, this yellow guy here allows you to distort the image. So again, click and drag, and it'll start to distort in all funky ways. So those are kind of your 4 options for editing a texture a little bit further. However, let's say that I'm trying to line up these 4 tiles exactly in my surface. If I use the green one, which allows me to scale, click and drag on that guy, it can find the midpoint, or if you just click once on the pin, it'll allow you to start to move it. So if I know that I want the 4 tiles to line up exactly, I can move it to this point here, and SketchUp will usually snap to it. I can move it to this point that is my 2 tile width, and then click to set it back down. And then from here, if I click and drag it, I can drag it to the edge here of my surface. But then, this one is not quite right. I've got it correct in my width, but not quite in my height. I'm still kind of cutting my tile a bit here. So we can further start to fix this. So if you're finding that these 4 grips here are not really allowing you to do exactly what you want to do, while you're still in this kind of edit mode here, you can right click again and uncheck fixed pins. And now everything turns kind of black and white. And from here, I can start to move each of these pins to the specified corners that I want. So I'll click once, and it lets me pick it up. And I'm going to bring it to the top corner of this tile. Same one here, click once, pick it up, and bring it to this corner of this tile. And now I can start to click and drag, bring it exactly to where I want it. And now I've got my 4 tiles exactly placed in my surface. Does that make sense to everyone? Do we need to see it again? Going once, going twice? Okay. Let's look at how to create a new material, because that is going to be part of your assignment. You'll be asked to create your own materials for your tiny house. To create a new material, come back over to the Select tab. And we saw earlier that this little box with the plus sign lets us create material. And this little dialog box pops up. And you'll see that it just duplicated exactly what my active material was. So if you don't want that image, totally fine. You can uncheck the texture image, or we'll see how to add a new image here. So I unchecked it for now to get rid of that. You'll give your new material a name. You can specify a color and specify a texture image. So how do I find a texture image? In Canvas, I gave you a website that has free images that are nice quality. You can also Google search for seamless textures and see if you can find some other ones, but I think you might have some luck with this website here, and again, it's free. So let's go to that website here. This website is good also for in the future if you're rendering. You can get really high quality images here. You can get different texture maps along with it to show more like roughness or shadows, things like that. So this is a nice website to use. And they've got all these different categories over here. So let's just look at what they have for brick, since we've been using brick. Maybe I don't like any of the bricks that SketchUp has. Looks like it's got 64 textures for brick. All of these different guys here. And you can see they look pretty high quality. So let's find one. Some of these are pretty ugly. Ooh, let's use this weird herringbone brick. So we'll give you a preview of what that looks like. And then to get it downloaded to your computer, you'll want to probably do two things. First, where it says 4K, you can reduce that. 4K is going to be very nice quality, but we can also get nice quality from 2K, and it'll make our texture, the file size not as big. So you'll see right now it says 33.71 at 4K. If I reduce that to 2K, suddenly I'm down to 9.95 megabytes, or basically 10 megabytes. You want to try and still find high quality images that aren't going to be huge file sizes, because SketchUp doesn't really do well with a lot of heavy materials bogging it down. You'll start to see some performance issues. So I think 2K will be good for our purposes today. And then this next little drop down asks you what kind of file type you want. We'll just go with a zip file. So it's going to compress everything into a zip file for you. And then if I click zip, it gives me options for the different maps that I want to download into my zip file. We really only need, for the purposes of this class, we really just want this diffuse model, image. And really that's just going to give you the plain color image. All these other things can give you texture, roughness, all that kind of stuff, which would be great in the future if you're working on renderings, things that you need high quality for. But again, just to kind of keep our SketchUp model down, I'm going to go ahead and uncheck all of this extra stuff. Some of it I'm not even super sure what it is. But I'll just keep the JPEG on diffuse. And then now I'm only down to 1.8 megabytes. That sounds good to me. Hit download. And it should have downloaded here. And you'll probably just need to extract it since it's in a zip file. So I'll hit extract. If you have a certain place that you'd like to extract it to, maybe you're keeping your own personal collection, you can extract it to there. I'll just keep it in downloads. And now if I go in here, I can see that it's given me my brick image. So let's go back to SketchUp. And I'm back to creating my custom material. So give it a name. I'll say herringbone brick. And then if I click on use texture image, or I can hit this browse for material image file, it'll bring up my file explorer, and I will just navigate to where that image is, hit open, and now it's in my material. And then of course from here, if you know you want to scale it width and height, you can do so here. If you want to change the color, you can do so here. Or you can just leave it as is. I'll just leave it as it is for now. Hit OK. And now I have the herringbone brick in my model. And I have my paint bucket tool activated. Click. And there it is. It's pretty nice quality.
That is great.
Yeah.
Feels like a street in hometown.
And from here you can do the same things that we looked at earlier. You can go over to edit mode, pick different colors if you'd like. Remember to hit colorize if you want everything to become the same color. Let's check out the color wheel this time. Start to move it around. See the different colors that it's giving me. And if I ever don't like the color I've chosen, I can hit undo color changes. Or reset color. Reset color will get you back to the original color. So you can play with your materials however you'd like. One more thing that I really want to touch on is I mentioned seamless textures. What that means is an image that you're not really going to be able to tell where the edges are. So this herringbone brick, it looks like it could go on forever and ever, but that's not really true. The image itself just has been lined up in such a way that the edges kind of blend together and smoothly repeat as though it is one large image. If you had non-seamless textures, it would look like you've just stamped the image across the surface a bunch of times. So just for laughs, let's go look at it. I'm just going to Google wood floor. Images. And this will be a good one to, oh, I don't want to shop anything. Bye, Maurice. Let's look. This one will be fine. I'm going to save this one. Go back to SketchUp. Let's say I create a new material. I'll go find that image. Open. Call it wood floor. Hit OK. And see with this one, you can see the edge. And if I made an even bigger rectangle here, and I put that on, you can see that it just looks like you stamped that image across the surface several times. So that's not what we're looking for. We don't want to be able to see the clear boundaries of the image. Let's check my brick that I brought in. So I'll get another large rectangle here. Find the herringbone brick and paint that one. That one you can see a little bit of the repeating, but overall the quality is a lot nicer. Does that make sense? Seamless versus non-seamless? Okay. So on Canvas here, so your actual assignment today is to start applying materials to your tiny house model. There are a few surfaces that I am going to require you to have a material applied to. So I want you to paint the exterior walls of your tiny house, the interior walls of your tiny house, the floors, and try to have at least 3 different flooring materials. So it could be a carpet, a wood, and a tile. Whatever you want. Your kitchen, laundry, dining built-ins, and try to choose different materials for each, the cabinets, the countertops, and the hardware, or the door pulls. Your living area, first floor bedroom, and loft built-ins. And altogether, I want you to try to use at least 10 different materials in your model, which hopefully won't be hard to do. And 3 of those 10 should be custom materials that you have found an image for and created the material yourself. And then I've also linked a YouTube video here. This guy's kind of dorky, but he gave a really good video tutorial. He goes really nice step by step in giving you clear directions on materials.